Welcome to Inside Racing. When Victorian jockeys lodged their licence renewal applications for the 95-96 season, there was one very notable absentee. Riding legend Harry White, who was then 51 years of age and no longer in the demand he'd enjoyed for so many years, had decided to call it quits. No fuss, no fanfare, just the way Harry liked it. Like it or not, he'd had to put up with constant attention throughout his brilliant career. A career that had brought him close to 1,900 winners, 60 Group 1s, 4 Melbourne Jockeys Premierships, and that stunning achievement of 4 Melbourne Cup victories. Getting Harry to talk about his glory days in the saddle has been one hell of a task. At last, I'm outside his property at Gisborne, close to Melbourne, and I'd better get inside before Harry changes his mind. Harry, your dad, Harry White Sr., was a successful jockey, but his career was coming to an end when you were just a little fellow. So you don't really remember your father as a jockey.
Well, I never actually saw my father ride in a race, John, which was, well, I was too young, but he won his Caulfield Cup in the year of 43 on a horse called St. Warden. And of course I've seen photos of him as a rider, and old Pop used to keep reminding me how good he was. And
your grandfather?
My old grandfather. And,
yeah.
and so I think he must have been a pretty good rider, although I didn't see him, John. I'd like to have. But he was my teacher, and anything that I was in doubt about my own, if I had a bad day and something didn't go right in a race, I had the right man to tell me what I did wrong. And so, but he didn't encourage me, and he didn't stop me. No. But old Pop took me, that's my grandfather, Pop took me to be apprenticed out of school at the age of 13 3/4. Asked the headmaster, could I leave this? Those days it was 14 before he left school. Could he leave? Could he leave 3 months early? He said, well, he may as well go if all the good he is here. So old Pop took me down to Tony Lopeson's. Yeah. I wasn't even, I couldn't be signed up as an apprentice jockey till you're 14, so I did 3 months probation, or preparation, whatever.
Now Tony must have thought something of your ability as a jockey, because one day he threw you on a horse called Alpino at Flemington, and this was to become your first winner. Now I read that you, at this stage, barely knew where you were going. You were pretty green.
True. Well, I could just carry on with that, Johnny. You're right, it was my first winner, but it was also my first race ride ever. And in those, well, I hadn't had a trial, to be honest. I hadn't been in a race trial, so I didn't know even what to expect when I got into a race.
So back then you were allowed to ride in races?
Back then you couldn't do this
without the barrier
today.
trial education?
That's true, yep. So I was on a big mission. Not that I knew anything about it. I was only just turned 15. Horse was called Alpino, and it was at Flemington. And I think it was called the Braybrook Handicap. It's funny you can remember those old things better.
Yeah. Well, Harry, you were destined not to complete your apprenticeship with Tony Lopes. You transferred your papers to a trainer who I met in more latter years, the late Stan Murphy, who was best known in that era, in the late 50s, as the trainer of horses owned by the Hollywood legend Fred Astaire. You're
right. And Gregory Peck had he had the 2 owners, That was just before I joined them. I came the horses were still at the place, but the movie'd finished. They were out here making that movie On the Beach.
On the Beach, yeah.
Yeah, and anyway, when I arrived at Stan's, and how I come to arrive there was, well, I just got sick of, not sick I suppose, I felt I could improve myself by going to another trainer.
Around about this time of your life and in the early stages of your apprenticeship, and back in the Tony Lopes days, you did that more than once.
Yep.
Now, I've read accounts of this stormy period in your young life where you were described as irresponsible, reckless, words along those lines.
Yeah.
Are they exaggerated, or was Harry White a pretty wild boy?
Well, it's hard to really give an answer on that one, to cover all those things, John. I think it was lack of inexperience in racing. And by saying that is, I do remember the words of Tony Lopes, and they were true in those days. A jockey starting off had to have 100 race rides to know where in the hell he was going in a race. And they were true, because there was no videos to watch people, to watch yourself, your mistakes. So, 100 rides of experience to know where you were in a race and who you were following in a race. More importantly, you don't want to be behind the wrong horse or a slow horse. And my other problem was, yes, I'd agree with what you said, Nelly. I was a little bit too keen, and all I could see was getting first home in the race, mainly through keenness and lack of experience.
You had a stack of suspensions, didn't you?
Well, I ended up one time there. My apprenticeship was 7 years in those days. You had to do from 2 you're 21. I did half of it suspended, three and a half years.
Yeah.
I'm not no animosity on the stewards. They were doing their job. I wasn't doing my job, and it took me a long time to wake up and do the job right.
Well, they made sure you did this because you incurred a suspension at the steward's pleasure. Their patience ran out. They said, "Cop this, young Harry.
Yeah.
You've got 12 months for your trouble.
Yeah.
Reapply for your licence when you've got your head straight."
Yeah.
Now, is that accurate?
Pretty well, Johnny. They never actually gave me steward's pleasure. They never gave me a period when I was ever going to get my licence back. As far as I knew, I was never going to get it back. Wow.
Lost in the wilderness.
That's exactly right. Lost in the wilderness. So, few things, sort of, I deserved it. That's the truth. I deserved it. That pulled myself up, made me think where I was going and where I was at and what I was doing wrong. So it was a good experience in a couple of ways. In the two ways I'll say was, I thought a lot of my friends in those days, so I had a few dollars in the apprenticeship in my bank. When the money ran out, so did my friends.
Funny thing that.
So that learned me a good lesson. And the other good lesson was, not long after, well, it was about that time, I met my wife, Loris, and she taught me to have a family, taught me about family, which I was ignorant to. And, I didn't have a great family life myself, excuse me, and that was lacking, I think, in my life, John. So they were the two good reasons for me.
Loris became the mother of your three children.
True.
Firstborn Karen.
Yep.
Secondborn Dean.
Okay.
And the third, another boy, Brent.
Brent.
A jockey.
Yep.
And still riding.
Still riding, and he rides pretty darn good too. He would have made the grade, but his weight's his problem. He's unfortunately a little bit bigger. He's a bigger boy than me, and about 54 pulls him up, 55 kilos,
Yeah.
But that's his problem. But he can ride, John.
I'm sure you realise how tough it must have been for him to follow in the footsteps of a dad who's ridden 4 Melbourne Cup winners. Not easy.
I couldn't see that at first because I follow my father, as you were saying. But it hit me later on. That was a problem. He'd go to the races and people would say, "How's your dad going?"
Yeah.
And you'd like people to say, "How are you going?" And I can understand that.
Harry, your dear old granddad, or Pop as you call him, came to live in the Stan Murphy stables to keep an eye on you at one stage, and I think you shared a double bunk.
We did. That was just prior to meeting my wife Loris, so I was still a little bit on the erratic side. We had the double bunk in Stan Murphy stables. Pop used to sleep downstairs and I'd sleep up on the top bunk. But the main reason he moved in there was to keep me and keep me from getting any more trouble and look after me. And he did that very well. And I might just say, Johnny, that he wasn't a religious man, but every night I was very impressed. You'd think I was asleep, and he would get out, kneel down on his knees on the side of the bed and say his prayers. And, you know, I'm not a religious person either, but you can't help but get moved by those sort of things, you know. Great.
Did he say those prayers out loud?
He did.
You could hear him?
I could hear them.
And were they simple requests?
Well, they were the family things. Yeah, simple. Yeah, they were the words, yeah.
Yeah, must have touched you deeply. You've never forgotten it.
Well, never forgotten, no.
Harry, trying to pinpoint one single attribute that made you such a great jockey is difficult. I think the single most significant attribute is your very nature. You're so laid back, composed,
I think you've hit it right.
relaxed. Surely you transmitted this to the animal.
I think you've hit it right on the knocker there, John. I think I don't believe that I'm better than anybody else. I just that's me. Simple, just simple things, and these things have just come my way as I've survived in the racing game, and just they were even better than I could ever hope for.
Yeah. Things
that I achieved, but and I do believe too. I rode in races without the idea of money. The thought was just the horse, not the money. And the last few years, I'll confess to that, the last few years of my riding, or just the last maybe 1 year, 2 years, I rode for the money, Johnny, to try and get a little bit put away for when I knew it was coming up to retirement time, and I didn't do any good. So that's what the answer, or what I'm saying is there.
Yeah.
If you love what you're doing, which I did, you'll be more successful than expecting to get paid for the job you're doing. Don't treat it as a working thing. I didn't.
When other jockeys would be tensed up, smoking cigarettes, walking around the jockey's room, fidgeting, you know, you'd be sound asleep.
Well, not quite true, but I'm a relaxed person.
You did do a bit of sleeping though between races.
Well, I didn't think that horse could win. That's the truth of that.
You're talking about the first Melbourne Cup win in '74.
No, the second one.
The second one.
Yeah.
Bart Cummings was wondering where the hell you were. The riders were about to be legged up.
You're right.
No, Harry.
No, Harry was.
Is that true?
Napping in the casualty room beside the jockey.
You were sound asleep.
Well, I did.
Somebody had to come and fetch you.
I wasn't hyped up with nerves. The doctor came in, but the reason I wasn't hyped up with nerves because it was the second wettest year run, Melbourne Cup. The only worst one was Van der Hum. And Thinkbig had no hope. That was in my mind. He couldn't win. So I'm only just one of the numbers, so I just went to lay down. Anyway, history now tells us different. Never give up.
We'll talk about those 4 Melbourne Cup winners a little later. But now, if we were to try and discuss the merits of all the good horses you rode, we'd be here for 3 weeks. So we won't even try.
Good.
But we will pinpoint the ones that I happen to know were your personal favourites. Now, I've been reading a lot about your career, and there was one common thread in every story. You regarded Soba as the best horse you ever rode.
That's what you're saying to me, John?
Is that true?
Yeah, well, yes. That is it. I believe he was and is the best horse that I put a leg over.
He was a hell of a 3-year-old.
People say that he was.
He won the Underwood Stakes,
Very
he won the
athletic
Caulfield Guineas, he beat Century, and then came the Caulfield Cup. He just annihilated them, didn't he?
Yeah.
200, Soba a length and a half clear. Stormy season, guns in trying, but the 3-year-old's too good. He mightn't be italic, but he's not far short of it, and Soba's won by 2 lengths.
Now, he ran in the Victoria Derby, and if there's a low point in your riding career, this was it. He got beaten, and you copped plenty of flack.
Well, the long and the short answer to that one, John, is true, and it hurt me. The horse, I just had a feeling sitting on the horse in the Manahi yard prior to going to the barriers that he just didn't feel like he normally used to feel, to me. Anyway, in those days, they've changed the barrier start of that race. It was straight after that particular year. I drew over the outside barrier, and it was a very short run to the turn, and you virtually had no hope of getting in if you drew wide. But anyway, we went out of the straight, and nearly got in, but I didn't get in. And, the horse started to pull very hard and
Hanging out. Yeah, he wasn't comfortable, was he?
Hindsight now, if you could rerun the race, I'd probably been young, I wasn't game enough, and I'd been riding into instructions by the trainer, Ken Hilton. I should have gone to the front. He was probably good enough to do that.
Let him
still win.
Yeah.
Probably good enough, but the power of the horse and the gameness of the horse, he fought it out all the way down the straight with a horse called Diana.
With Soba, Diana's doing better, it's a boil over. Diana got to the lead and won it ahead to Soba.
And when I was coming back after the race, it hurt that I knew I was going to get in trouble. Horse was odds-on favourite.
Yeah.
So, but I felt I would give myself, I'll be brave. I felt that much for the horse.
Yeah.
That I thought I'd blame myself.
Yeah.
I say I rode him bad. Well.
So you told nobody that he'd been hanging out badly and didn't feel right. You just said, I slaughtered him.
That's virtually, not in those words, but virtually did that, and well, I sacrificed myself, for the horse. And any jockey watching this today should think it's not a good way to go. Say the truth, because I didn't. I should have told the truth. Anyway, we won't talk about that, Johnny. That happened, and I still was able to come out on the Thursday and win the Victorian Oaks for John Hawkes, trained by Untold Treat.
Oh, great filly.
But I did notice the crowd didn't clap me too hard when I came back in.
Yeah. So you rode for John Hawkes in the early stages of his training career. Toll Treese, in fact, was the one to put him on the map.
But she was. She was his best racehorse. Yeah. She was a good filly.
But Toll Treese in front, 100 metres out, holding Soba at bay, and Little Papoose coming with a strong run, might beat them all. Toll Treese in front, however, near the line, it's hanging onto a narrow lead, and it's won it from its stablemate, Little Papoose, the next. A length and a half to Soba.
You rode many a brilliant sprinter. You won 3 new markets, 3 Oakley plates, goodness knows what else. But you've always said that a horse called Manahi was the best sprinter you put a leg across. Brilliant, but erratic.
Yes, he was both of those things, John. I think his record could have been a hell of a lot better had he not have had an injury. He used to hang off the track in his races and virtually throw them away because the horse was hurting. He would, his injury and his record should have been a lot better. But I only had the one ride on him, and it was in the Newmarket, down the straight course. There was no turns to get around. And I riding in track road during the week. Des Judd was his trainer, a good trainer. And I was so confident I would win. I did say to I remember I used to talk these things over, leading to my father to get his opinion too, and no doubt he'd want to get my opinion because he'd go and have his few dollars on it. And I said, look, I think it'll win. He said, did he have that little bit extra there when you were training him when you rode him on the track at the end? Did he have that little bit there? I said, yes, he had that little bit there. He said, right, and you didn't have to use it. That was, you knew you had the power there. Anyway, we went out, we won the race. Dad had a good day and Pop had a good day on the punt, so and I was happy I won.
And he beat Nebo Road, ridden by the late great Athol George Mully.
Yes, I could. He was a hard man to beat in a tight finish. And I know why, George Mully, I was only young at that stage in my career, but he was a great horseman.
Young jockeys everywhere have role models, idols, inspirations. Yours was a fella called Bill Williamson.
Yes.
And you're not the only jockey that was inspired by Bill Williamson. I don't know if you're aware, he was also Roy Higgins' favourite.
Well, it proves I'm right. I thought he was pretty darn good. He was my idol when I was an apprentice at Mentone with Tony Lopes. He was the king jockey in those days, and I grew up. Unfortunately, didn't have a lot. I'd like to. He went overseas, John.
Yes, he was away from.
Yeah, he went early, reasonably early, and I'd have liked to have ridden. I did ride in a race with him probably, but I just admired him as not only as a horseman, but as such a cold person. He'd come back after a race, and you wouldn't know whether he won last or whether he just won the Melbourne Cup.
Poker face.
Same expression. And I might have modelled myself a little bit on that. There's nothing wrong with that. I quite like that old way. Yeah.
Now, you rode side by side with the Professor. In fact, you and Roy Higgins pretty much dominated the Melbourne senior jockey ranks here for season after season after season. And you had great regard for Roy.
I was a little bit younger than Roy. Not going to say...
You love that.
Just a little bit younger. So, I was pushing uphill to try and, win a race against him, because he had the experience, he had the experience, he had the ability as well. So I was a little bit younger, but anyway, I did top him about 4 times in the Jockey's Premiership. Might have fluked him on those off days here and there. But he was a very hard man to beat in a race finish, John. Very hard man. At his best, Roy was as good as I've seen in the hardest I rode against, I would have to say.
Still good mates?
Still good mates, yeah. Of course. I'd like to see more of him, but we're all busy and we've all got a bit older, John. Got things to do. He's in the media now, and he's doing very well in the media, and I'm running a farm, so I'm talking to the cows and Roy's talking to people.
Time to get on to your quartet of Melbourne Cup wins.
Right.
The first was in 1974. You were 30 years old, and it was your 8th ride in the Cup. And you're on Think Big, and I don't think you were all that excited about riding him either, coming into the race.
Not excited at all, John, no. Ridden the horse previously at Moonee Valley Cup, and he came in about, near last. And I let my opinion known to Bart that I didn't like his chances much in the big race. But anyway, Bart said, "No, you stick with that horse." He said, "He'll be a different horse at Flemington," which was 10 days, 2 weeks' time. Yeah. He said, "He'll be a different horse. So you stick with him." So anyway, Roy was riding Leilani, got suspended. The ride on Leilani came available.
Oh, I bet you were lobbying hard.
I was engaged to ride Think Big, but I thought, well, now Roy's out. I was number 2 jockey. I should go up a ladder.
Did you put it to Bart?
Yes, I did. But Bart, in his wisdom and in his way, said, "No, I'm bringing down Peter Cook to ride Leilani. You stay on Think Big." And I had to do as I was told. Simple as that.
Battle Heights is up, going for the lead now. On the outside, coming out to have a crack at his Igloo. Leilani is looking for a run between them, will need it. And here comes Captain Perry down the outside, and Turf Cutter is mowing grass. Battle Heights went to the front of the 200-metre mark from Leilani. Captain Perry on the outside then is Turf Cutter and Sing Big. Leilani is getting to Battle Heights, and on the outside Captain Perry. Leilani just in front. Sing Big is picking it up down the outside, and Sing Big has got up to win the cup. Sing Big has won.
I think it was as good as Kiwi's finish. I think it was. That might be a biased opinion from the man who liked the horse, but I believe it was.
Now, Harry, 1 year later, you're on Think Big again. This time, though, he's got 5.5 kilos more, and the reins came.
Good point. 5.5 kilos more, John. Good point. Today, they don't get as much weight as what he got.
But he hadn't won a race in between.
Exactly.
So he was really handicapped on his Melbourne Cup win a year earlier.
Exactly. And with the rain that came, there wasn't much going for us. So no wonder I went to sleep prior to the race.
No wonder.
No wonder. We all added up to it. Couldn't win, John.
So in your mind, you thought he had no hope?
No. And Bart also had another good fancier in that race who loved the wet track.
Holiday Wagon.
Holiday Wagon, that's the horse. But Think Big, I do remember passing my old stables at Chiquita Lodge, and I was last and going nowhere, ploughing through the mud, and plenty of that over me. And I had to give old Think Big a couple of whacks with a stick, see what he could do. And to my surprise, he started to wind up. Through the power and strength of the horse, he started to power through with his strength through the mud. And as I come to the home turn, I realised I'm going to darn well win this race, going like a winner. But being so far back, and the others had all got their positions out wide, I couldn't go out wide, so I had to stay on the inside on the heavy ground. But anyway, I straightened up and saved. It was probably a winning move. I saved about 10 lengths going right through on the rail. All the others went out in the middle of the course. Maybe he exaggerated 10 lengths, but he certainly saved a lot of ground. And there was only one horse in front of me straightening up, and that was the horse which no one knew what it was. I know what it was. Well, I know what it was, Johnny. Medici.
Medici.
Yeah, Medici.
Malcolm Johnston was the jockey. Yeah.
And I got past him, and between me and Think Big, there was no way we were going to be beat then.
Now, Harry, 3 years went by and up you bob again.
Yeah, well...
You're on Arwon, a horse that...
I did a little trip away, went overseas, went to England actually, rode a few, so I had a little bit of a break. And as he said, I came back and got the ride, just happened to be at the right place at the right time. It was a pickup ride on Arwon. The rider, once again, got suspended prior, and George Hanlon gave me a ring and, would you like to ride Arwon? And I said, yes, I would.
Yeah.
And I must admit, Johnny, all the horses I've rode, I don't know, went out of the straight and the race was mine. 10 furlongs from home. I just felt that confident riding a horse, you know. And hardest part about riding Arwon was that he had a short, sharp run. He could pass him quick, but he couldn't keep that long run going. So
at the time and
wait, and that was the hardest part of riding him. When am I going to let him go? I had to wait till I could see the winning post inside.
Carew, Arwon. Here comes Arwon with a great run. 200 metres left to go. Arwon takes the lead in the Melbourne Cup. Arwon is clear from Carew. They're followed by Boldness and finishing well down to Lever. Arwon in front from Boldness, close to home. Arwon in front. Arwon in front, close to home. He'll win. Arwon from Dandelion. Third home is Carew, followed by Boldness. Further back in the field would be So Called.
Right, Hyde Perner, your fourth and final Melbourne Cup winner in '79. Trained by Bart Cummings at this stage of his career.
Yeah.
And this was a memorable finish between yourself and your old foe, Roy Higgins, who rode Salamander.
True, Johnny. Once again, happened to be at the right place at the right time, at the track, finished my work for the morning, was sitting in the car before I was about to go home. Leon Corson's in those days was foreman for Bart Cummings. This would be 8 days prior to the race. Come up to me in my car before it was, said, Harry, would you like to ride Hyperno in the Melbourne Cup? I didn't have a ride. And I said, well, all I want to know is how's his leg? How's his legs? And Leon said, they're no worries, perfect. Okay, I said, I took the ride.
Sarfraz is tackled by Hallberg on the outside, and Red Nose is joining him with a good runner. Salamander there also, and they're followed by Hypernoa, and a gap in the field to Karua, and back behind them K-Magistrate, about 250 metres left to go, and Red Nose on the outside had to move up. Red Nose on the outside is tackled by Salamander with a great run. Salamander and Hyperno is joining in down the outside. Hyperno on the outside and Salamander, Hyperno, Salamander. They hit the bunny finish. Nearly a dead heat between Hyperno and Salamander.
You remember what Roy said when you were pulling up?
I think he wanted to save with me, but I was away with the birds. I was so confident or sure that I had one. And to my surprise, it was the closest finish of a Melbourne Cup finish. I thought I won by more. But no, it shook me up a bit, that.
He was a wonderful old horse, and I know you loved him.
Well,
in fact, you gave him a home for life here on the property, but
yeah.
That wasn't the only favour he did you, Hyperno. Now, Melbourne jockeys are very harshly judged by Sydney folk. Some of the great Melbourne jockeys have had no luck in Sydney, Jack Purtell being the most notable. He never ever rode a winner in Sydney.
Yeah.
And at one stage, Harry White was heading the same way.
You're not wrong there, yeah.
But thanks
exactly
to Hyperno,
yeah,
you broke your duck.
Yeah, no, he was a darn good racehorse, you know. He beat Kingston Town one day at Weight for Age. So he's on his day. He was as good as any of them.
Well, you're a horse lover and you're a great old sentimentalist. Think Big and Hyperno had a wonderful home here at Glenduna in their twilight years. They're both buried on the property. Think Big's headstone has been installed. Hyperno's is yet to come.
It's coming. Yep. I'm very proud to have them here, and I think they both were happy. They were really happy. I know they would have liked, the Melbourne Parade would have liked to see more of them in Melbourne, but I had to do what the horses wanted. The horses told me they didn't want to be there. They thought they were going to the races and they got all nerved up, and they were just happy, relaxed here and in their routine. True words said by Colin Hayes once, horse is a creature of habit, and it's true. Stay in the routine.
And Harry, those two horses, Think Big and Hyperno, played a major part in establishing for Harry White a precious piece of Australian racing history.
Well, it's all they can do for them. What they did for me, what more? Couldn't do anything less than give them a good home and a good finishing up point, John. You know, I wouldn't be talking to you today if it wasn't for Think Big and Hyperno.
Now, you mentioned earlier, Harry, before Arwon's Cup, you headed overseas for a little busman's holiday.
That's it.
Now, while you were there, you did something that few Australian jockeys have ever achieved. And gosh, it must have been a thrill. You rode a winner at Royal Ascot.
Yes.
How did that happen?
I knew the trainer. Actually, the trainer was getting experience working for Bart Cummings. William Hastings Bass. That was his name at that time. He's now gone up a notch or two. They call him
Lord Huntingdon.
Lord Hunting, that's exactly right.
That's his current title.
That's the one.
He has gone up a notch.
Anyway, he said, come over and have a holiday. And it wasn't that easy because I had 3 kids, one young at the time, which was Brent. And I didn't like to go, and my wife, more so than me, didn't like to go and leave the kids. So we took them with us, 3 of them. And we lived in a little country town called Newmarket, and it wasn't easy. Anyway, we were there for about 6 weeks, and when I got to Lord Huntington's stables, he had plenty of horses, but none of them had raced. They were all 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. I thought, where's all these good horses I'm going to ride? That's what I gone there to think I'm going to do. Anyway, he started to run a few, and they ran accordingly. And then he came to this one called Greenland Park. He said, see her, and he showed me her, and I said, yeah, she looks good. He said, well, if she doesn't do any good, I've got nothing. She went into the Queen Mary Stakes, which was like the Golden Slipper or the Blue Diamond in that 2-year-old race. Queen was there at Royal Ascot. It was the biggest day of the year. Top hats on. And you wouldn't believe this. The barriers opened, and I dropped my whip. If you planned for something to go wrong, you couldn't have planned it. Or if something, it just fell out of my hand as she jumped out of the barriers. I just couldn't believe it. So I've got no whip.
Why didn't you pinch somebody else's?
I'm
sure that's happened before today.
Someone done that once. Anyway, I won the race and beat a filly called Devon Ditty by an inch. And I'm using my arm. That's all I had. I didn't have a whip, but she was a 2-year-old. She wouldn't have known that anyway.
No.
And she tried her hard out, and we got home. And we won. I won about 6 or 8 races, but that was the highlight of the trip for me. I didn't get to meet any of the royal family, but close to it because he trained for her. And I wasn't invited. It takes a little bit of getting known over there, and I was invited to go back the following year, which was a feather in my cap, I thought. But my kids were growing up and they were at school age, and we did it a bit hard. We didn't have it as easy as George Moore did when he was over there, Johnny. He did it first class. I was busman's holiday.
Now, Harry, I'm about to touch on a contentious issue, but I know you won't mind discussing it. Many, many jockeys down through the ages have been given nicknames. You got one.
Right.
And I know you didn't fancy it.
No.
But it stuck and is still used today. Handbrake Harry.
Well, as I say, bad news seems to travel quicker than good news. I could tell you, even in England, a jockey over there called Willie Carsons, he heard about it over there, and that stunned me properly when he put that on me, and he called me that over there. I thought, no, this couldn't be happening. But I thought I was far enough away from it. No, anyway, it happened at the training track as a joke. There was Robber Roy, being Roy Higgins, Harry White, Handbrake Harry, and Bag of Bob. Bob Ball being the track rider #1 for both Cummings there.
Okay.
And, I don't know, mine seemed to stick thicker than Robber Roy.
Well, it was... it had an alliteration to it. It flowed.
Flowed, yeah.
And I'm sure in most cases it was in fun.
Well, I'm sure it is, John, but some people think it is fun.
Yeah.
It wasn't a funny point with me because, I thought, well, I've done nothing wrong to be accused of that particular nickname.
Putting on the handbrake.
Yeah, putting on the handbrake. Yeah, exactly. And it used to hurt, more so when I was riding, but I used to get offended. Yeah, up until about 2 years ago. It's only just starting to... Maybe I'm getting a bit older and more mellow.
Harry, you were mid-40s when you became associated with a very good horse called Rubiton.
True.
Good enough to win a Cox Plate for you.
Yeah, I could feel the vibes at the training track that Harry White's days are coming to an end.
Could you really?
I could.
Did you overhear comments? How did you judge that?
Just call it nature, call it getting the vibes, instinct maybe. But I was getting vibes that people were not going to stick with me that much longer.
Harry's getting a bit long in the tooth.
Yep.
That type of thing.
Yeah, over the 40. Anyway, he come along and saved me. I might say, may as well, that's what I believe. He gave me a few more years at the top.
How did you get on him?
Well, that just being at the right place at the right time again. Darcy Christie, foreman for Tommy Smith in Melbourne. We were discussing the horse. I'd been so impressed with the horse's track work at Moonee Valley when he nearly slipped over and still got up and beat the track work one I was on for Tommy Smith. Anyway, and I said, oh gee, I think he's a good horse, that fellow. And the owner must have, well, he did. He overheard me saying this to Darcy, talking to Darcy Christie. And one of the chains rider later on, because of their reasons, and rang me up. Harry, would you like to ride this horse, Rubiton? Well, I said, this is terrific.
What a beautiful kick along for you at that stage of your career though.
Unbelievable.
You'd have been born again.
Born again, yeah.
Rubiton finishing on down the outside, ducked in badly. Our Poetic Prince is the leader halfway down the straight. Rubiton is coming out. Rubiton on the outside. Our Poetic Prince. Rubiton going. The better takes the lead. Rubiton won the WS Cox Plate. But Brawny Spirit was the leader, coming down to the 200 is clear of Stormy Region and finishing on Bella Serrata and down the outside, Star of Maple. Bella Serrata finishing very strongly along the inside is coming after Brawny Spirit. Bella Serrata on the inside and Brawny Spirit as they go to the line. Brawny Spirit maybe from Bella Serrata, they're wide apart.
The last nice horse that you were involved with, very late in your riding career, was one of the smallest horses you ever put a leg across. Brawny Spirit.
That's correct, John. Yeah, little pony, not much bigger than a... Actually, Thoroughbred's got to be a certain height. He just scraped in.
Yeah.
Don't think it was 15 hands. I do remember his first run in a race. They got me to do his track work, and I said, oh, well, I knew he had some speed. I said, I think we could be a good thing at Pakenham. Should run him in Pakenham race.
Mm.
And we know now, and if we'd have known then what we know now, we should have backed him because he just bowled it in at Flemington.
Yeah.
And that was his first day out.
Finished up winning in Newmarket.
And won, yeah, which I wasn't part of it, but, you know, I think, but he was a pretty good horse, John. Yeah, very good little sprinter, game little guy.
Now, Harry, you were coming close to the end of the road by the time Brawny Spirit came along.
Yeah.
How were you feeling, you know, within at this stage? Were you feeling hurt, a little bitter, puzzled, frustrated?
No, I knew exactly what was happening.
Would you go weeks without a ride, without an offer, without a phone call?
Maybe that. I could understand it. I never had held any grudges to any trainers or owners because it's a business. I was the same when I was a jockey. I wanted to ride the winner of the race, and I might have hurt some people on the way by not riding their horse, taking another ride. So I could understand that, I accepted that, but I was embarrassed. And Kevin Mitchell told me one day at Caulfield Racetrack, he sat next to me.
Yep, he rode until 55 or 56.
He said, Harry, you'll ride to my age. He said, if you don't get embarrassed out of it. Those were his exact words. And when it was happening to me, they rang a bell, those words. That's what happened to me, John. I just went to Geelong races, was my last day out. Rode the horse, I think it might have run third, I just forget. Came home, I was living here at the farm. I said to Loris, my wife, I'm not going to go back to work anymore. That's how it happened. But it's very hard for a sportsman to know when they should leave the building.
Yeah.
And I felt that too. I didn't know how to stop. Well, it's all you know. You get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and you've done it for 40 years, whatever.
How do you stop?
How do you stop?
Yeah.
And so, that was as good a way as any, wasn't it? Just don't go back to work.
But you didn't make any special announcement? You didn't give it to the press?
I didn't want
the phone must have rung a few times after that
yeah,
for rides.
I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want any publicity, I should say.
But that's you, isn't it?
Well, that suited me to go out quietly. I came in quietly, no one knew me when I came in. I wanted to go out the same way, and I did.
Apart from looking after the cows and the calves, you entertain yourself on occasions on a little 3-hole golf course you've got out there. Designed by yourself.
Yeah. I must show that to you, Johnny. We'll go out there and have a little chip out there. And,
good fun?
I used to like having a game of golf. I wasn't much good. I mean, I had a handicap of 24, so that tells you how good I was. But I used to enjoy that, and I got a little bit of a limp in the leg, and I thought, oh, well, probably one of the old race falls caught up with me in the later years in life, so I knew I'd have trouble walking around a big golf course, and I didn't have time running the farm, so I brought the golf course here, made one here for myself.
Now, Harry, that little limp in the leg you're talking about, you fairly well ignored.
Yeah.
You took little notice of it. Eventually, you decided to investigate, and the diagnosis was the early stages of multiple sclerosis.
Correct. Yep. I can accept that, John. I'm very lucky, unfortunate, it didn't happen when I was 16, but I'm coming up 60, so at least I've had a life. Not that I'm saying I'm going to die, I don't think it's life-threatening, well, I'm sure it isn't, but it restricts you, and I have to get help to help me on the farm now, because it's a muscle deterioration type thing, and one leg doesn't work as good as the other leg, and I get tired quicker. Anyway, I can live with that.
Would you welcome to Adelaide, Mr. Harry White?
You must have been bowled over and very humbled by your induction into the Australian Hall of Fame.
Well, I was very honoured, yes, John. I was surprised and whatever. I do remember I said to you today, Bill Williamson was my idol, and to think that they put me up on the stage with my flag next to Bill Williamson's, I thought, well, it's got to make my story complete. That was great.